Emma Augusta Hempstead was born on August 15, 1818, in New York, into a working family of modest means. Her father, Christopher Hempstead, spent part of his early career as a foreman at James's Rope Walk, a large industrial operation that once stretched from Sand Street to Tillery Street. The work provided steady employment but little lasting security. Later, Christopher left the rope works and entered the milk business, supplying dairy products to markets throughout Brooklyn and New York City. He was widely regarded as industrious and good-natured, though he never accumulated significant wealth. Emma's mother, Sarah Hempstead, remained at home, managing the household and caring for the children, while her husband labored to support the family. Their domestic life reflected the realities of early 19th century urban living, where financial stability was uncertain and family roles were clearly divided. Within this environment, Emma grew up accustomed to responsibility, routine, and limited opportunity beyond the home. Contemporary accounts described Emma as physically attractive and socially engaging. Her good looks and natural charm distinguished her in a city where women from modest backgrounds often faced narrow prospects. These qualities may have helped her navigate social settings and form connections that would otherwise have been difficult to access. They did not alter her circumstances overnight, but they shaped how she was perceived by others. As Emma entered young adulthood, her life remained firmly rooted in New York's working neighborhoods. It was during this period, before any public scandal or notoriety, that she became acquainted with George D. Cunningham, a man already known in Brooklyn. Their meeting marked the beginning of a relationship that would soon lead to marriage and fundamentally change the course of her life. At that time, neither foresaw how consequential their union would become in later years ahead. Emma married George D. Cunningham in 1835, beginning a domestic life shaped by instability and frequent change. Cunningham was a familiar figure in Brooklyn, noted for his strong physical build, outgoing manner, and fondness for alcohol. He moved easily through social settings, but struggled to maintain lasting financial success. During the 1830s, he was involved in a distilling firm known as Cunningham and Harris, an enterprise that reflected both ambition and risk. When the business collapsed around 1839, George was forced to seek other means of support. In the years that followed, he shifted between occupations, sometimes working as a commission merchant and at other times returning to the liquor trade, which appeared to suit his temperament. His employment was inconsistent, and the family's circumstances fluctuated accordingly. Despite these challenges, Emma and George had 5 children together, and the household remained intact as they navigated the uncertainties of urban life. Like many men of unsettled prospects, George was drawn westward when the California gold rush began. Hoping to improve his fortunes, he left his family behind and traveled in search of opportunity. His absence placed additional strain on Emma, who remained responsible for the children during his prolonged absence. Eventually, George returned to Brooklyn and resumed living with Emma and their children at a house on 4th Place. This fragile stability ended abruptly in 1852. George Cunningham was found dead in his bed, and a physician determined that he had died from a sudden fit. The death shocked those who knew him, but further revelations soon followed. It emerged that George had taken out a life insurance policy valued at $10,000, a significant sum for the period. Questions immediately arose regarding the legitimacy of his marriage to Emma, setting the stage for controversy. That would follow in years. Following George Cunningham's death in 1852, attention quickly shifted to the question of his life insurance policy. The policy, valued at $10,000, represented a substantial sum and immediately drew scrutiny. Acquaintances of George disputed whether he and Emma had ever been legally married. Some claimed George had insisted he was unmarried, while others recalled him saying that he had wed Emma while intoxicated and only realized it afterward. These conflicting accounts cast doubt on Emma's right to the insurance proceeds. Despite these objections, the claim was ultimately resolved in Emma's favor. The insurance company accepted her position, and the payment was made without further legal challenge. With that decision, the controversy surrounding George's death faded from public attention, at least temporarily. Emma, now in her mid-30s, found herself in a markedly different position than before. Financial independence altered her circumstances in ways previously unavailable to her, as the wife of an unreliable tradesman. The money allowed Emma to move more freely within New York society. She was no longer bound by the same economic constraints that had defined her earlier life. Contemporary descriptions continued to emphasize her attractiveness, and with financial security, she was able to associate with people from a higher social class. This change did not bring public notoriety, but it quietly reshaped her daily existence. For a time, Emma withdrew from notice. Her name no longer appeared in connection with disputes or scandal, and she lived without drawing attention. That period of relative obscurity ended when she entered a new social circle. Through this transition, she came to know Dr. Harvey Burdell, a respected and prosperous professional. Their association would soon place Emma back into public view, under circumstances far more consequential than before. Dr. Harvey Burdell was born in 1812 in the town of Herkimer, New York, one of 5 brothers raised in a respectable family. After completing his medical education, he moved to New York City, where he established himself as a dentist. His practice quickly became successful, attracting wealthy clients and earning him a strong professional reputation. As his income grew, Burdell invested heavily in stocks and real estate, gradually accumulating a fortune estimated at $100,000, a considerable sum in mid-19th century America. A visible marker of his success was his purchase of 31 Bond Street, one of the most prestigious addresses in Manhattan at the time. Burdell used the property as both his personal residence and a boarding house. The arrangement provided income and allowed him to maintain control over the household. On the second floor, he kept a private room and his dental office, carefully separating his professional space from the living quarters of his tenants. Despite his outward success, Burdell was a deeply contradictory figure. Neighbors described him as arrogant and difficult, and several former patients accused him of dishonest practices. His personal life was equally troubled. One engagement ended in scandal when, on the day of the wedding, he demanded money from his fiancée's father, prompting the immediate cancellation of the ceremony. Such incidents contributed to a reputation that contrasted sharply with his professional standing. In 1855, Emma Cunningham moved into the Bond Street house with her children, renting rooms on the 3rd floor. Other boarders lived in the building, including a man named John J. Eckel. Rumors soon circulated about Emma's relationships with both Burdell and Eckel. These accounts, common in a gossip-driven city, reflected speculation rather than established fact. Yet they shaped how the household was viewed by outsiders. By 1856, the atmosphere inside 31 Bond Street had grown increasingly strained. Emma Cunningham remained a tenant in the house, and she and Dr. Burdell were widely believed to be involved in an intimate relationship, though its precise nature was never clearly defined. What was clear to those around them was that the relationship was deteriorating. Conversations between the two were reported as tense, and their interactions lacked the stability expected within the household. Much of this tension centered on Emma's growing jealousy. Dr. Burdell's 24-year-old cousin, Demas Hubbards, was a frequent visitor to the house, and her presence became a particular source of resentment. Witnesses later described Emma as increasingly suspicious and unsettled by these visits. Burdell's broader reputation further aggravated the situation. He was known as a womanizer, and rumors circulated that he engaged in inappropriate conduct with female patients within his dental office. These stories, whether true or exaggerated, contributed to an environment of mistrust. Members of the household began to notice signs of unease. Servants and boarders later recalled raised voices, prolonged silences, and hurried movements through the building. The home no longer functioned as a calm residence or orderly boarding house. Instead, it became a place marked by emotional strain and unresolved conflict. No single argument or incident was identified as decisive, but the accumulation of these tensions was evident. By January 1857, the relationship between Emma Cunningham and Dr. Burdell had deteriorated significantly. The household remained outwardly intact, yet those inside sensed instability. The days immediately preceding the end of the month passed without any reported confrontation, but the atmosphere inside the Bond Street house was widely described as uneasy, setting the context in which the events of January 31st would unfold, without immediate explanation or resolution for those involved. On the morning of January 31, 1857, Dr. Harvey Burdell was discovered dead in his room at 31 Bond Street. An errand boy entered the house and found Burdell lying on the floor, surrounded by blood. Alarmed, the boy immediately sought help, drawing the attention of other residents. Dr. John Francis, a physician living nearby, was summoned and arrived shortly afterward to examine the body. Dr. Francis observed extensive injuries and concluded that Burdell had been strangled. He also identified no fewer than 15 stab wounds to the body, any one of which could have caused death. The violence of the attack was immediately apparent, and the scene suggested a prolonged struggle rather than a sudden assault. Burdell's body showed no signs that medical assistance had been sought during the night. Authorities soon arrived, and Dr. Connery, the coroner, assumed control of the investigation. Upon inspecting the room, he noted that Burdell's papers were undisturbed and that none of his possessions appeared to be missing. The absence of theft led investigators to dismiss robbery as a motive. Attention instead turned toward the possibility that the killer was someone familiar with the house and its routines. A careful search of the premises produced several items of interest. Police recovered a blood-stained shirt bearing the name J. Ketchum, along with a sheet and towel soaked with blood. A dagger was also found and was believed to be connected to the crime, though no witness could definitively identify it as the murder weapon. Blood had penetrated the carpet, marked the walls, and stained the inside of the door. Despite the severity of the attack, no clear explanation for the killing emerged in these early hours. The house was secured as officials prepared for an inquest into the circumstances surrounding the death that followed. The inquest into Dr. Harvey Burdell's death began under the supervision of coroner Dr. Connery, aiming to establish both the circumstances and possible suspects. Witnesses were called to recount events on the night of January 30th to 31st, 1857. Several neighbors reported hearing unusual sounds near 31 Bond Street. William Ross stated that he had observed a tall man wearing a shawl unlock the door and enter the house shortly before 11 p.m., moments before hearing a partial cry of, "Murder!" Across the street, Mr. Strangman also reported hearing a loud cry that seemed like someone in pain, although he saw no one outside. Charles Brooke recalled a disturbance between 10:30 and 11:45 p.m., and William Farrell, who had been seated on the steps of the house, claimed to see two men approach, one of whom entered the residence. He later heard a sound resembling a heavy object being knocked over. Residents in adjacent buildings, however, stated they heard nothing unusual, adding conflicting accounts to the timeline. During the investigation, authorities noted that the perpetrator appeared to be left-handed. This fact attracted attention when it was revealed that Emma Cunningham, residing on the third floor with her children, was left-handed, a detail that would later become significant. Amid growing scrutiny, Emma Cunningham produced a marriage certificate claiming she had wed Dr. Burdell on October 28, 1856, at the home of Reverend Uriah Marvin. According to her statement, her daughter Augusta and the Reverend's maid had been present as witnesses. Both Reverend Marvin and his maid testified that a wedding had occurred, but neither identified the groom as Dr. Burdell. Instead, they later confirmed that John Eckel, another boarder in the house, had posed as Burdell during the ceremony. Public opinion became divided, with speculation about Emma's motives intensifying. Some suspected her of acting to secure Burdell's fortune, while others considered her a grieving widow. Based on the collected evidence and testimonies, the coroner's inquest concluded that Emma Augusta Cunningham, John Eckel, and George Snodgrass had willfully and maliciously committed the murder of Dr. Harvey Burdell, resulting in their indictment and setting the stage for the subsequent trial. The trial of Emma Augusta Cunningham, John Eckel, and George Snodgrass commenced on Wednesday, May 6, 1857, drawing intense public and press attention. The courtroom at the time was crowded, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Newspapers printed detailed daily accounts, often highlighting sensational aspects of the case. Mrs. Cunningham entered the courtroom dressed in black, her face partially veiled, accompanied by her two daughters, whose expressions reflected concern and apprehension. John Eckel was also present, though his presence was comparatively understated. The prosecution was led by Attorney General Stephen Cushing and District Attorney Anthony Oakley Hall, while Mrs. Cunningham was defended by Gilbert Dean and Henry Clinton. John Eckel had separate legal representation, and counsel for Dr. Burdell's estate monitored proceedings closely. The prosecution presented a thorough review of Mrs. Cunningham's past, including her controversial claim of a secret marriage to Dr. Burdell. Witnesses recounted observations from the inquest, providing testimony on household tensions, sounds heard the night of the murder, and relationships between household members. Key witnesses included Mrs. Cunningham's children, Helen and Augusta, who testified that they had slept with their mother the night Dr. Burdell was murdered, reporting nothing unusual during the night. Her two young sons offered minimal information, one becoming distraught and excused from the stand. Dr. Blaisdell and Mr. McGuire provided evidence that Dr. Burdell had expressed concern about his personal safety prior to his death. Additional witnesses, including Mrs. Stanbury, household staff Hannah Connon and John Bartell, and former chambermaid Mary Dono, described strained household dynamics and reported tense interactions leading up to the murder. Throughout the trial, the defense systematically challenged the prosecution's circumstantial evidence, highlighting contradictions, inconsistencies, and Dr. Burdell's reportedly contentious character. The marriage certificate was excluded from jury consideration, further weakening the prosecution's case. After 3 days of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned a verdict on May 9, 1857. Emma Augusta Cunningham, John Eckel, and George Snodgrass were found not guilty. The acquittal concluded the trial, though public opinion remained deeply divided, and questions surrounding Dr. Burdell's murder persisted. In the aftermath of the acquittal, Emma Augusta Cunningham faced a complicated and turbulent period. Although legally free, her public reputation had suffered significantly. Newspapers and members of the public continued to question her motives and integrity, particularly regarding her claim to Dr. Burdell's estates. The New York Times expressed frustration at law enforcement and offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to the capture of Dr. Burdell's murderer, highlighting the perceived failure of justice. Despite her legal victory, Emma's social standing remained precarious, and she returned to the Bond Street house while awaiting a ruling on the validity of her claimed marriage to Dr. Burdell. In August 1857, a new scandal emerged. Reports alleged that Emma had attempted to present an infant as Dr. Burdell's child to secure his estate. Authorities claim she had arranged to acquire the baby through a Dr. Ewell, but after Dr. Ewell informed the district attorney, police intervened. Emma was arrested, yet her lawyer, Henry Clinton, successfully argued that she had been entrapped, resulting in the dismissal of charges. Although she avoided further legal consequences, public opinion turned sharply against her. The surrogate court later determined there was insufficient evidence to prove a legitimate marriage, and Emma received nothing from Dr. Burdell's estates. Following these events, she left New York for California, seeking to rebuild her life away from the scrutiny and infamy that had engulfed her. Decades later, in 1887, Emma returned to New York, older and largely forgotten by the society that had once watched her so closely. She died in September of that year at the age of 69 at her cousin's home. Her passing received only a brief mention in the New York Times, a muted acknowledgement of a life that had once captivated national attention. Dr. Harvey Burdell's murder remained unsolved, and over time, various confessions and theories were proposed, but none confirmed. The case endures as one of the most mysterious and sensational unsolved crimes in 19th century New York. Emma Cunningham's life, marked by social ambition, legal battles, and scandal, continues to fascinate historians and true crime enthusiasts alike.